Luke Inman in the captain's chair once again today, filling in for our guy Sam Ekstrom. So you already know we're going to be talking some NFL draft today and the Vikings plans heading into April.
Arif Hasan with Pro Football Network. I had a tweet go viral yesterday, and now I hate it. So I've learned that lesson.
Luke Braun of Locked On Vikings, and I'll make sure that is reflected on Arif's podcasting report card.
It's the Minnesota football party. Run it!
Locked On Sports Minnesota Podcast. It's endless Minnesota Vikings talk with the diverse voices of your local experts. It's time for the Minnesota football party. It's your guys hanging out talking next level Vikings football. So join in with Pro Football Network's Arif Hasan, Locked On Vikings Luke Braun, Superior Sports Talk's Luke Inman, and Vikings insider Sam Ekstrom, plus the biggest names in Minnesota football for the Minnesota football party. And it starts now.
Welcome in. It's the Minnesota football party, part of the Locked On Sports Minnesota Network. Fellas, got a fun one lined up today. I want to talk about that KOC presser down in Indy yesterday, some of your guys' biggest takeaways. Plus, as Luke mentioned, the Vikings aced their NFLPA report card. And then later, I got a fun little draft for us to partake in. But first, joined as usual, Arif Hasan, Pro Football Network, Vikings insider. He's joining us live down in Indy at the Combine on Twitter at Arif Hasan NFL. Next, Luke Braun, the kid you copied off in math class, on Twitter at Luke Braun NFL. So, guys, Ekstrom, he's currently on like a 10-hour Greyhound bus ride traveling to Michigan. He's going to call the St. Thomas hockey game. What do you think Sam watches on these long rides when he pulls out the laptop, signs into Netflix or Hulu? What do you think Sam's binge show is? Like, if I know Sam like I think I do, it's something very family-friendly, maybe TV PG, a lot of Planet Earth, Full House reboot, maybe.
Yeah.
Young Sheldon.
I'm going to say classic romantic comedies.
Yes.
Oh, I could see that. To me, I mean, Sam is very dedicated to his work, right? Mm-hmm. And so I could see him just pulling up a season of All or Nothing, you know?
There you go. Yep.
Yeah, how did the Cardinal season go? Maybe there's an assistant coach that shows up in episode 8 that the Vikings hire at some point, right? Like, that seems like a very Sam thing to do.
I just picture him on this bus with all these collegiate hockey studs, these top-end alpha male athletes, and then you got Sam in the front row trying to connect to the Wi-Fi, watching The Wonder Years or MasterChef Junior. You know,
why won't When Harry Met Sally load? What's going on, man?
Yeah. Oh, it's streaming again now. Oh, wow. Okay. Yeah. Maybe if he's feeling really wild, maybe he turns on a Parks and Rec or maybe The Office, something like that.
Yeah, when he's feeling frisky about it.
Yeah, when he's feeling frisky. Yep, wife's out of town. Maybe can, pour himself a glass of red, something like that. Okay. All right. Before we jump into it, guys, remember, follow along, Locked On Minnesota YouTube channel. Hit the subscribe button and on Twitter, give us a follow. It's at Locked On MIN. And remember, we're a podcast too, free and available, all platforms. Subscribe, drop us a 5-star review. Tons of great choices over there. Your one-stop shop with endless Vikings talk with local experts. Again, do us a favor, hit the subscribe button and drop us a 5-star review. I want to jump into that KOC presser yesterday, but first, every day I go post a new poll over in the Locked On Minnesota YouTube community page. Yesterday, I asked fans, which Vikings defensive player will excel the most under Brian Flores? 4 options: Harrison Smith, Hunter, Andrew Booth I threw out there, and Brian Asamoah. Check this out. Brian Asamoah takes it down. Nearly half the votes. Hunter and Harry basically tied for second. Booth and last.
Fan brain. That is fan brain. 100%.
100%, right? So I know we've touched on this quite a bit already ever since Brian Flores got hired. So just real quick, guys, 30 seconds. When you think of Brian Flores and his defense, which current player do you think thrives in this defense the most? Whether that's a young guy taking a big step forward or one of those key vets, maybe, jumping back to a high level again, or maybe just a wild card, a less obvious guy that nobody's talking about. Luke? Let's start with you.
Yeah, we've done this, but it's Harrison Blitz, right? Like,
it's Harrison Blitz.
Got to be that's
my guy.
It's the idea of, especially like improvement year to year too, because his 2022 was so quiet because he never blitzed, and that was part of what we're trying to change here. I think that'll be an emphasis.
Yeah, I think. I think when we had this discussion, I mentioned that Eric Kendricks is probably going to get a little bit of a revival out of this, and I think that that's well worth watching. I think if we were to pick like who's going to appear to be the best defensive player on the team, I think you could probably say Danielle Hunter. Right?
I agree.
Like he played at a pretty high level. I think it just unnoticed is kind of a weird way to put it, especially for such a high impact position. But I feel like people didn't give him the kind of, especially in the second half of the season, including Ed Donatel, by the way, we had that discussion for how well he played. But it feels like somebody like Danielle Hunter is probably going to do pretty well in this system because of the way Brian Flores designs rush attacks.
Yeah, honestly, probably not a bad pick in here. I mean, the defense was so bad last season. There's only one place for a lot of these guys to go. Hunter and Harry, you kind of touched on it, always come to mind first because when you think of the Flores defense, you think guys who can do a little bit of everything, have that versatility just from play to play. Harrison and Hunter, both guys I think Flores is going to be able to just maximize the most by moving them around, forcing offenses, forcing quarterbacks to just constantly try to keep track of where they're at, whether it's, Harry in the box one play and then center field the next, or Hunter on the edge on first and second, and then maybe over the A gap or B gap on third down, whatever it may be. And then as far as those young guys go, I think Asamoah, I think he was ready for a big leap no matter who the coach was. He just seems primed to kind of take on a starting role, kind of fly around, make some of these splash plays. And then there was a lot of comments in there as well. Got to mention Lewis Seen, and it sounds like, he's having a speedy recovery thus far too. A lot of people excited to see what Lewis Seen looks like, not just coming back from injury, being a first-round pick, but playing in a Brian Flores defense. In fact, Arif, you're down at the combine. I was looking at last year's combine numbers. It's easy to forget because we didn't get to see him play. We didn't talk about him much. But Seen had a great combine down there.
Yeah,
4.37. Yeah, 4.37 40. Good vert, great broad, great explosion numbers. And I know everybody freaked out about not taking Kyle Hamilton, myself included. But I kind of forgot just how weak Hamilton's testing numbers were too at the time. Not that the
4.61, something like that.
4.68, I want to say. I mean, I should have it up, but yeah, definitely in the late 4.6s. And again, not that the combine should sway us too much in either direction, but after he ran that slow 40 time, he definitely started to slip a little bit in the mock drafts and the consensus big board stuff like that.
Right before we move on, I do want to add, I'm a huge combine guy. I love using athletic testing data to project players going forward or to match them to teams, which it looks like we'll have that opportunity given kind of the really strong trend that was established last year for the Vikings. I'm a huge combine guy. I think it really tells us a lot about players. I think more of a combine guy than you, Luke. But I will say, with Kyle Hamilton's combine, it was something that I was willing to kind of discount him a little bit, but I didn't move him for my top safety. And if you take a look at how Hamilton played in the second half of the season, he struggled a lot in the preseason. He did not have a great beginning to his season. Second half of the season for the Ravens, he was probably the best rookie. I shouldn't even say probably. He was the best rookie safety. Wow. He obviously wasn't the best rookie DB. There were two phenomenal cornerbacks, right? But he was the best rookie safety by a substantial margin. So he did turn out to be pretty good. And if he keeps that up, which maybe he won't, I think that's still kind of a red flag in that regard. That's going to be kind of an interesting conversation for Vikings fans,
Yeah, and Sauce and Tariq Woolen, the two cornerbacks that you're obviously referring to. Yeah. And you're right, like it's such a fluid situation, so many ebbs and flows throughout the season, but it really just goes to show you we got to pump the brakes. I know it's a what have you done for me lately league, but you really need 2, 3, sometimes 4 years to look back and really fairly grade these drafts out. By the way, another guy who had a great combine, kind of forgot about for his position group anyways. It's just fun because he's excelling now, especially for his draft slot. He was drafted in the 6th round. KJ Osborne didn't excel or like blow up necessarily any one test, but top to bottom, he was one of the better overall wideouts at the combine. 4.48 40, 38-inch vert, 123-inch broad jump, 7-second flat 3-cone, just super solid. And it's just fun to look back and see his rise through the ranks as a 6th-round pick. One more, too, by the way. I was just looking these up. Actually had a pretty bad combine for the Vikings. Kind of forgot about this guy, too. Cam Dantzler, Mississippi State. 4.6, 4.40.
all that bad weight he put on.
Oh, yeah, that's
get up
right.
to, what was it, 180? Like he's like 20 pounds of bad weight
to get up to 190.
Yeah, just to get up to 190.
Right.
Yeah.
And then he bombed all of his tests.
Yeah.
Dude, it was bad, man. 4'6", 440, only 30-inch arms too. Vert was below average. So again, just kind of fun to look back on these testing numbers for good or bad sometimes. Thought that was interesting.
He'll be special to me forever because he was the first person I ever frame by frame zaprudered an Instagram 40 time for.
Oh,
that was a first for me.
It's a draft Twitter tradition, so I'm glad that you found yourself in that area. Yeah,
I'll always have that memory.
Arif, what's kind of the golden rule too? Is it with cornerbacks and wideouts, or just corners? Anything lower than 4.6, once you get in the 4.6s, kind of a threshold there where most of those guys just don't translate to the NFL and have success?
So the data tells me that it applies to both positions, right?
Okay.
The truism that kind of gets repeated among scouts is primarily around cornerbacks. They don't apply it as much to receivers, but it is very difficult to find receivers who uninjured, and I think this is important for the Anquan Bolden example, right? Who uninjured run 4.7 or slower. The uninjured caveat does run into some problems, right? Because people were applying it to Laquan Treadwell, even though his injury was a year removed, right? But people are like, oh, he's still recovering from the injury. It was such a brutal injury. That is true, but if it takes a year to recover from an injury, what are we getting out of this, right?
Totally.
There was some discussion surrounding Keenan Allen, right? I remember when I first found, kind of this finding, which is, not a particularly complex finding to arrive at. That was the time that Kelvin Benjamin had just finished his 1,000-yard season. And my argument was also that Kelvin Benjamin was actually bad, but he was the only rookie with 1,000 yards, and no one was buying it.
Right.
I'm going to claim that one. But Jarvis Landry was doing pretty well. So it's well, okay, maybe he's one exception. I don't know. But I would argue that Jarvis Landry was kind of overrated at the time too. Right. So yeah, it's pretty hard to find these post 4.7 or the slow 4.71 guys. You find injury guys like Anquan Bolden and Keenan Allen, but for the most part, it is hard to find a 4.7 receiver, which there's not many 4.7 receivers, right? But the proportion of 4.7 receivers that succeed is virtually 0%, while the proportion of 4.3 receivers that succeed is slightly higher than average when compared to combine draftees.
That makes a ton of sense, too. And I'm still 80%, 90%. Go with the film. But again, the combine, especially the last decade or so, has really been a huge key and determining factor for a lot of these teams, especially when you got two guys similarly ranked and can kind of decipher one guy from the next two. All right. Remember, every day, post a new poll over that Locked On Minnesota YouTube community channel. Go check it out. Hit the subscribe button so you never miss a beat. We're almost to 5,000 subscribers, so please go smash that subscribe button and help us get to our latest milestone. All right, guys, KOC presser down in Indy yesterday. Big bullet points for me. Tell me what you guys think. First off, always heavy on the culture talk, both him and Kwesi. They love to start these things out anytime they can, bringing up the right guys for this championship culture and this championship mindset. Number two, singing the praises of Justin Jefferson, both on and off the field, echoing, again, a lot of what Kwesi had to say. Number three, this is the one I kind of latched onto the most, the love for Brian Flores. Like we just kind of talked about, spoke highly of his ability to create a defense from the X's and O's standpoint and be able to be versatile and do different things depending on the week and the matchup. And then lastly, he touched on targeting guys that also had versatility, even mentioned specifically guys who can play special teams and maybe do some kick and punt returning, etc. Maybe a hint that they're looking at getting some competition in for Jalen Reagor. He also spoke very highly of Lewis Cine and his rehab too. That's what I got out of it. I think I touched it all. Tell me if I'm missing anything. And more so, tell me what jumped out to you the most of that list. What was your biggest takeaways? Let's start with you, Arif.
Yeah, I mean, the O'Connell presser, which I actually was unable to attend, which is kind of sucked because all the Vikings beat that I'm familiar with were there. But I was able to watch it back. And, obviously he's very proud of the way that, the NFLPA, I guess I shouldn't say the NFLPA graded, all the players polled by the NFLPA graded the facilities, which I know Luke Braun had some really weird interactions with on Twitter when he was talking about how, great it is that the Vikings, I'm not saying Luke.
Oh, my God.
Yeah, you had some.
No, my mentions are insane.
Yeah, let's put a pin in that because I want to hear that in full, right? But I think that, connecting that to kind of the larger conversation about player culture, it felt earned in a way that a lot of culture conversations aren't. And then you add on top of that somebody like Brian Flores that comes from a place that's we know to have a good culture, which is Pittsburgh, and having like kind of Flores have a discussion about kind of the things that work, the things that don't work. I thought that was really nice. But, I think that, O'Connell, I think, kept a pretty even keel. I mean, he was like pretty humble about the things that they needed to correct, all the ways that they self-scouted. He talked about ways that they felt like, hey, we noticed that all these 1-high teams, they play 2-high against us, right? Why is that? Well, obviously it's Justin Jefferson. I mean, also they can't run the ball, but it's also Justin Jefferson, right? And I didn't use that information well enough, right? I know that they're changing their scheme to accommodate ours. So what do we do about that, right? He talked about how, it's good to have home runs as a runner, but you need to be more efficient, which is, I think, one of the first times I've seen a head coach talk about running the ball that way, which was kind of nice. Yeah. Zimmer said basically the opposite. I don't care about efficiency. The home runs matter. Right. And it's like,
wait, but
I don't know.
Okay.
But it was really cool to see. And I think that, I really like Kevin O'Connell as a coach. I'm a little bit concerned about a potential drop-off for the Vikings next year, and I think ways to avoid that drop-off are kind of contained within the discussions that he had.
Yeah, Luke, I do want to touch on that NFLPA stuff here in the next segment, but just before we get there, your top observations from KOC's just trip to the podium yesterday as well?
Yeah, it was pretty milquetoast. I pulled away like two things. I thought it was interesting that the assistant D-line coach that went to Oregon, I thought it was interesting that he was like that everything about that was up front. Like I think a lot of times when a coach leaves, you go, oh, is there some bitterness? Is he leaving the org? Does he not want to be here? But no, it's just, hey, there's this college job I really want, and if they give it to me, I'm going to take that over whatever is in the NFL. And you go, okay, that's, and everything was like fine about that. I really liked what we heard about him and Brian Flores, how their relationship goes back all the way, and how it seems like both he and Adofo-Mensah are really excited about Brian Flores as a leader, and as a cultural presence. And I think to the most casual of observers that don't know the details of like Brian Flores' story with Miami, I think there could still be kind of a sentiment that stems from is it unfair to call it a smear campaign that Miami had against Flores? Is that an unfair word?
I would argue that there was a information campaign coming from the Miami Dolphins. I would also argue that it was not in disalignment with a lot of the Miami beat reporters, not all of whom have a positive relationship with the Miami Dolphins, and so would not be a part of that kind of. And so there's a strong feeling among the Miami contingent here that there remained a culture problem, and a big part of that has to do with Brian Flores. And so we'll actually see, because I heard super positive reviews from the Pittsburgh contingent, hearing super negative reviews from the Dolphins contingent on that point. The initial impressions are just that, initial impressions, but they are positive here in terms of his tenure with the Vikings. But I'm really curious how it plays out, because there were a lot of concerns coming out of Miami that some of them are probably unwarranted for sure. I think that you're hitting on something there, but it feels like some of them were warranted. I don't know.
Yeah, and they're hitting it real hard. Like the Vikings have been very forward facing that, no, we think this is a positive culture influence. And if that doesn't bear out, then these are comments we can revisit.
Yeah. And I want to add that the stint in Pittsburgh, even though it was just a year, I think that is extraordinary. Like, I think that that's a really important kind of I'm not saying he had to, but I feel like
had to have
changes significantly because of it. That's very believable.
It seems like he took a lot away from it. Like he talks about Tomlin all the time, and I learned this from him and I learned that from him.
Yeah. So if that changes the way that he approaches things, to me, that is 100% credible. That would make sense to me, that maybe all the Miami reporters are correct about their assessment at the time. Maybe this time in Pittsburgh, even though it was only a year, was really substantial about the way that he approaches a lot of these things.
think we're all interested to see how this Flores tenure plays out here over the next year, maybe longer. And I think at this point, too, you can definitely start to hear and feel this collective mindset shared between Kwesi and KOC on a lot of things. And not that that's really uncommon to hear the GM and the head coach speak so cohesively with one another, but it's just clear they're both on the same page. And that goes all the way back to the day they were brought in and building this 3, 4, 5-year blueprint of what they both wanted. And it's just going to be interesting now to see year 2 now of this plan and how it all unfolds this offseason specifically. And if the instant success they had in year 1 changes any of those plans, because it still feels like they got one foot in this rebuilding bucket and one foot in this win now bucket. Got to be competitive. But nobody thought they were going to win 13 games last season. So does that dictate or change their aggressiveness to keep that window open now? Because you heard Kwesi bring it up when he spoke regarding a lot of these big contract decisions and the notion that they've already had these conversations months and months ago. I mean, none of this is like a shock to them by any means. Like, they know they're in cap hell. They know they're going to have to cut some big names. So this was all in the plan all along. My question is, does that plan change because they were so much more successful than anyone thought they were going to be in year 1? So it's just going to be really interesting to see how all this plays out this offseason. And I said yesterday, too, with Sam and Reggie, this is a monster offseason for Kwesi. And one where I think we look back in 3-4 years and say, this offseason specifically was kind of the turning point that got us to where we're at that point, for good or bad, because these decisions with not just Kirk, but Dalvin, Adam Thielen, Eric Kendrick, these are going to have a huge ripple effect in the next few years of what this team looks like. All right, guys, coming up, we're going to talk about the Vikings acing the latest NFLPA test. But first, a word from FanDuel. Hey, don't forget, we're presented by FanDuel, the official sports betting partner of Locked On, America's #1 sportsbook and official sportsbook partner of the NBA. Wolves covering the spread 2 nights ago. They moved to 32-32. Get in on all the action at FanDuel.com/locked on. And remember, if you're a new customer, try out the no sweat first bet. Up to $1,000 in bonus bets back if your first bet doesn't win. Download the easy-to-use FanDuel app and get your winnings instantly. Money lines, parlays, prop bets. FanDuel's got everything you need to close out the NBA season's final stretch. FanDuel.com/locked on. Make every moment more with FanDuel, an official sportsbook partner of Locked On. All right, boys, big story yesterday coming out about the NFLPA and their report cards for all 32 teams. These were done by the players, and the grading went off a variety of categories such as treatment facilities, food service, weight room quality, training staff, locker room, team travel, strength coaches. And wouldn't you know it, your Minnesota Vikings take the top prize. They earn the highest grade in the entire league, A's across the board. Their highest grades were in training room, training staff, locker room, and strength coaches. They got an A+ in all those categories and tied for first place among the lead. Their lowest grade, A-, nutrition department. What's going on with that nutrition department? A-. Come on, guys.
And Randy Moss get a vote.
Slip it. Yeah. Yeah. The Dolphins and Raiders right behind them in second and third. Meanwhile, Arizona Cardinals dead last in the league. Basically F's across the board. A couple B's in there. So,
there's like 3 teams that are just, their entire week is thrown into like complete chaos. Nobody gets to answer any combine questions if you're like a Ravens person anymore.
Okay.
Just total disaster.
So I'll say this. So the bottom 3 were right. They were the Raiders, the Cardinals, and the Commanders, right? Am I remembering that correctly?
Yep. So, I know Commanders for sure. Yep.
So here's one thing that I think is kind of important to note is that the Cardinals and the Raiders are owned by legacy owners, right? Like original family owners, right? All of the money that they've made comes from the NFL. The Commanders are different, but also it's not shocking that they underinvest, right? Like that's just who the Commanders are. Right. And hopefully won't be a year from now. Who knows when that sale occurs, but it feels like that's going to be forced pretty soon. But yeah, that's not shocking to me. I would imagine most legacy teams, maybe not the Rooneys, probably not the Maras, but most legacy ownership teams will rank a little bit lower here because the way that these questions were asked, and this is not a criticism, it's just context. The way these questions are asked are really, in a big way, aside from the staff questions, about investment and attention. right? The attention part comes when you're talking about like, facilities for families and stuff like that. Like there was one story where I forget which team it was. Maybe it was the Raiders, where a family had to breastfeed on the floor of the bathroom, and it's like that's
Jaguars.
Okay. Well, that's a huge one because that's not a legacy team at all. That's what I mean by attention, right?
Sure.
They also have rats. It's great.
Oh wow, good job.
We're doing great.
But Shad Khan is not the poorest odor by any reason.
Right.
Yeah. So it's investment in attention, right? And so you have to pay attention to some of these details, like I guess rats. That's a detail now. And you have to.
To be fair, it is Jacksonville. Rats are like a normal.
Okay, actually,
it's like floor molding.
It's a thing.
Yeah.
It's a fashion.
But the fact that the Vikings ranked near the top is not shocking given the amount of investment they're putting into their facilities. The NFLPA report noted that the Vikings had recently upgraded the facilities 3 times. Of course, attention is a big part of it, and it's great that the Vikings rocketed to the top because it doesn't even seem close. You take a look at the rankings across the board between number 1 and number 2, the Vikings are miles ahead.
That's crazy.
And a lot of that has to do with the investment they've made. They made a lot of recent investments. Some of them didn't even appear on the survey. For example, they talked about all the treatment facilities. They were graded on 98% of players felt that there was enough room in the hot tubs. 98% of players felt that there was enough room in the cold tubs. 98% of players felt that there was enough room in the athletic training room. It feels like there's one player that's just dissatisfied when you get
that guy.
Yeah.
Like the one guy who misread the question or something.
Yeah, right. Yeah, I'm just curious how that occurred and what happened there. Right. But beyond that, it didn't include questions like, is there a cryo facility? Personally, I don't think a cryo facility helps. I think that the science on that suggests that that's actually a bad idea. Not generally harmful, but just prone to error in a bad way. Think Antonio Brown. Yeah. But the Vikings have one, and they've got a number of other facilities that are supposed to be on the bleeding edge of player treatment, and that's not even in the questionnaire. The Vikings continuously invest in areas to try and help promote their players. In the locker room, the Vikings were, I don't know if they were number 1, but I think they were. They got an A+, I believe, in locker room, which is not about locker room culture, but about physically the space of the locker room. Is it organized well? Is it comfortable? Is it safe? Is there enough space? And the Vikings, the locker room is enormous, right? So that would make sense. But it's primarily investment and attention, and the Vikings made sure that they aced both of those categories. But the thing that's interesting to me is the staff grades. The Vikings are well ahead in the staff grades. The strength and conditioning coach, A+, that's good to see. The athletic training staff, my guess, I could be very wrong. My guess is that grade is inflated a little bit because of how dissatisfied they were with Eric Sugarman and the previous training staff, and just
the contrast,
having a better training. It might have just turned into it. So who knows if it's actually the best athletic training staff in the NFL? But I think that plays a role, and that's kind of some of the context we need. Luke, I think, has some more interesting stories about this, though.
Well, and it is it's great if you solved a problem so well that everybody's oversatisfied with it. That's awesome.
It's just context.
Yeah, there are some wild takes flying around about
what are the people saying out there on the Twitter sphere?
The two most common ones that I either heard directly or indirectly were some nonsense about how this is making that they're coddling the players and that it's making them soft.
They're soft. That's why they only went 13-4 or whatever.
Yeah.
What?
And
this is a bad thing.
Bottom of the list: Rams, Chiefs.
Look. If a player walks across a training room and doesn't find himself tripping while holding weights over the uneven floor, I mean, what does that teach him? Right?
Yeah. If you should be at constant risk of tetanus.
Right.
Yeah. I mean, just head on a swivel. Like, how are you supposed to be constantly
head on a swivel
of what's happening on the field? Yeah, I mean, it's a bulldog, right? How are you supposed to be aware of what's happening on the field if you're not supposed to be aware of what's happening in the training room? How are you
I will say the Vikings did have famous footing issues.
Okay, fair. Yeah. All right.
So that's one, and then the other one was I still don't quite understand how we got here. It's a reach and a half. That's something about how the Vikings. Well, of course the players are happy. The Wilfs won't let the Vikings cut anyone, so they get to make all the money they want. So yeah, of course they love it here. They get to they don't get. It's like something about how the Wilfs won't let the Vikings tank, and it's like you have to get like 4 different steps. There's a lot there.
Wow,
there's like a lot of people that
not true either. The Vikings have a normal amount of roster turnover. Okay. Yeah, it's like
this was not one person.
Okay, interesting.
So the premise is untrue, but were the premise to be true, it wouldn't follow. Right, like it wouldn't, it's not A to B.
You need like 3 other premises, all of which
I
are
love
outlandish.
the idea of a player like filling out a survey. Is like, is the locker room big enough? And they're thinking, well, they didn't cut me. Yes,
right.
Also, the idea of the Wilfs being like, Kwesi wants to be, hey, I don't think Jordan Hicks is doing well enough. We should cut it for cap space. And the Wilfs being like, no,
absolutely not. Okay, that would be great. Like Kwesi is like, okay, I'm going to cut Jordan Hicks and Amir Smith-Marset. And be like, Jordan Hicks? Absolutely not. No. Who's the other guy? like, come on.
I figured they would be near the top. They've invested so many resources into him the last 5 years or so. Still surprised to see him number 1, like king of the castle, top of the charts. How much do you think this affects or plays into free agency coming up? When a player sees this, how much does it move the needle for them if they're on the bubble deciding between the Vikings and another team, that when they see something like this, maybe it could give them the edge? What do you think?
I think so. I've got
a very interesting answer to that question, I think.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, I've got 2 thoughts. One is that the goal of this from the NFLPA is not actually to help players find the best spot for them to land. It's to force teams to think players will use this as a reasoning to find the best spot to land, and overall use that competition to improve the quality of facilities. The Cardinals are punching air right now. They are spinning because of this. Because I mean, this is one of the smartest things J.C. Treader's ever done, and he's a pretty smart guy. Mm-hmm. and so for this to kind of reveal what players believe about the facilities, it's absolutely going to. Because I imagine that either players did not feel comfortable enough to tell Cardinals or move it up the chain that this was a problem, right? That the training room is uneven, that we could trip while we're working out, holding heavy weights, right? They either felt uncomfortable saying that, or they said it and nothing was done, right? This creates a public accountability atmosphere for that sort of thing. It's going to improve, hopefully, the quality of all the facilities in the NFL as they continue to have to answer these questions and spin circles trying to answer like questions about why, there's not enough like recovery room after a workout, right? So that's fantastic, right? That's my first thought. The second thought is I do think that there's going to be a little bit here. I think it's probably gonna be overblown a little bit. But I think when it comes to some of the details like accommodating room for family, right? I think that that's going to be important to some players in a way that, some of these other things aren't. But if you were to ask me what matters more, the fact that Minnesota has an income tax that when you play 8 or 9 games here in the state of Minnesota versus if a player is deciding to play in Houston, right? And Texas doesn't have an income tax. What matters more, that income tax thing,
right,
or the fact that the Houston Texans ranked, substantially lower than the Vikings on this thing? I would say the income tax thing,
for sure.
Right? And this is me, like a huge proponent of income tax, right? That's just a reality, right? So yeah, it matters, but in terms of tiebreakers between teams, I'm not going to say it's nowhere on the list. I mean, there's a reason a bunch of players, when they sign with the Vikings, talk about the facilities, which now no longer sounds like BS, right? It felt kind of like, because of hearing it over and over, it felt kind of like BS. Now, I mean, that matters. It's going to matter to some players more than others, but in the grand scheme of things, I think among the tiebreakers, this is a little bit lower on the list. If you're an older player, I imagine it's going to matter a little bit more because the importance of these training facilities. You are more likely to have a family. You know what it can be like for a frustrating training environment to impact you. If you're a younger player, maybe not so much. Maybe you don't have contact with the athletic training staff. You don't know how important that is going to be. You haven't had much experience with the family environment. So it might matter more to different players for different reasons. I
mean, you're not going to see a big name, star-studded free agent all of a sudden take a massive pay cut like Saquon Barkley come to Minnesota or anything like that just for the facility. But when it does come down to deciding between this facility versus somebody else's, if that's, again, important to that specific player, maybe it could be a turning point for some guys. I agree with you. Great breakdown.
One thing on that, the economics, I don't think change all that much. Like you said, it's not going to lead to too much of a pay cut because at the end of the day, players are going to chase the money, and they should. But I think what it does is it gets a few more phone calls than you may have otherwise gotten, and it expands your options. Like I think about Patrick Peterson and the story of him ending up as a Viking. He called us, and that's how it works a lot of the time with older veteran players, especially as we look for that at cornerback, and maybe that's Peterson and maybe that's somebody else. But if you're looking for those older players that have made their money, who maybe aren't projected to make as much money, and it's like, okay, everyone's going to pay me $5 million and I'm just kind of choosing my destination, this kind of stuff matters. And that might not affect once you get into the actual bidding war, then it's just about, who wants to spend the most on me. But it will get them to say, hey, call the Vikings. I hear they have a really great facility. Let's see what they want to offer. And that may not have otherwise. You may not hear people saying, right. Are you going to be like, hey, call the Cardinals? They're going to toughen me up. That's not, that's not going to happen.
The Wilfs are just popping some bubbly right now, celebrating. Great look for them. Again, I mean, they've put in a lot of hard work, a lot of money they poured into those facilities. So, again, good look for the Vikings. Love to see it. All right, Arif, you're live down in Indy as we speak. 36th annual Combine, I want to say. I just want to pick your brain just for a couple minutes. What's the latest? What's the hot topic everyone's talking about? Have you heard any, hot takes, some rumors, some buzz down there? Who you chopping it up with, rubbing elbows with? Any big names maybe you've gotten a little starstruck by? What's the latest? Paint the picture for us. What's going on right now in your world?
So this is going to sound so arrogant, but it's the reality.
I can't wait.
It's becoming increasingly difficult, and it's a sign of how well I'm doing, and I really appreciate it. I'm really lucky, but it's a sign of that it's really difficult to be starstruck at this point.
When you're the star.
No, yeah, it's just I've already met Alan Page. First of all, that's just a personal hero of mine, right? Mm-hmm. But I saw Joe Montana, and my thought was, cool, right?
It's Larry David, Curb Your Enthusiasm. I get it. Joe Montana, quarterback. I get it.
If he walks over here, I might say hi, right? It's just it's kind of an overexposure thing, I think, really. Yeah. I don't want to ignore how awesome it is to be here and stuff like that, but it's number of combine, whatever fourth combine I've been to. I'm really excited to be able to they're actually opening up the workouts to media this year, which is crazy. So
that's cool.
They haven't done that before, so I'm excited to go do that and write about that. It's the novelty that's going to kind of attract me, so that's kind of cool. But I've been talking to all kinds of people. I've been talking to Luke, the old draft Twitter standbys, right? Justice and Chuck are here, yes. Right? Mike
the OGs, yes.
Just some classics from 2011 Twitter.
But yeah,
that. I mean,
force players, Justice, right now, force players,
pass rushers, right?
Yeah. Scott Creighton.
Scott Creighton, yeah. But yes, I've been talking to them. I've been hanging out. I've been talking to some legacy media here. I stole the Ringers table. I've been hanging out with Ben Solak and Danny Kelly, who's also a draft Ringers table from 2011, if you think about it. But also people from The Athletic, where I used to work. People from a bunch of ESPN. I was talking to Ben Baby, who covers the Bengals for ESPN. That was been fun. So yeah, I've been talking to as many people as I can. I'm getting increasingly concerned when people say, "Oh, I recognize you from your Twitter account." That is I am not confident about the impression I'm given there.
And they start talking to you about Turkey and how great it is, and say, "What's your deal?"
A couple of times, yeah. But yeah, no, it's been fun in terms of the conversation topic. I mean, earlier the conversations were about the Bears trading. What are they going to do? Are they going to trade down? Are they going to be able to grab a number of picks? What's kind of the haul that they'll expect to get? Are they going to trade below 4? Are they going to risk doing that? And then after the conversation's almost entirely been about Jalen Carter, right?
Yep.
There's been a conversation about kind of how serious it is, of course. What are the parameters of our discussion? We've had talks about what we can talk about, right, and what makes sense. Do we have conversations about draft stock? What does it mean to have conversations about draft stock? Hey, we've got a job where we kind of have to talk about that a little bit. What does that mean for us? And the fairly quick turnaround, I think, struck some people as surprising. He goes down to Georgia, posts bond, leaves the state to come back to Indy. That was surprising to some people. That didn't shock me at all. But like, I think that a lot of people conflate jail and prison. I think that people think jail and prison are the same thing, and they're not. Jail is a holding cell for you to await for trial, and you can post bond as essentially collateral for your release. You'll get that back. Actually, it's posting bail, but all the texts, the tweets were posting bond, and that means that he took out a loan, which I don't know, he's got enough money to not do that. But so he comes back. He's doing interviews with teams. We talked to a couple of GMs about it. The answers were universal. I wrote about it over at Pro Football Network, but that has been the dominant conversation here. Now we're kind of getting back to, hey, Antonio Johnson gave a great answer about versatility. Brian Branch talked about it a little bit. We heard, from Kyler Brown a little bit about kind of being a versatile defensive back, but a lot of the conversation was mostly about what's going to happen at the top of the draft. And then the conversation was, whoa, the top of the draft changed pretty substantially here. And now it's back to, hey, who needs a safety / corner? What is going to happen at wide receiver? When are we going to see them work out? Hey, the quarterbacks are going to throw tomorrow. Is that going to be kind of fun to watch? I don't know. So I don't know if they'll throw tomorrow. They'll measure tomorrow. But there's been a lot of kind of varied conversations about stuff today, but only after we kind of got through the kind of obligatory Jalen Carter talk.
And that's what's so interesting about Carter, because he is a clear-cut top 5 blue chip player, and now it's really tough to justify as a GM or coach with some massive red flags. Someone's getting a steal of a deal if he drops past, let's say, 10, but given that this happened so early in the process, and now he's got 2 months
to forget about it.
Yeah, I mean, 2 months to kind of put out the fire, so to speak. Do you think he can weather the storm, him and his agent and his team, weather the storm, or would you be surprised to still see him go in the top 5 picks? I know it's early, a lot of speculation.
Yeah, and like you said, this is speculation on my part. I want to be completely clear that I have no information, no sourcing. I am guessing. My guess is that he will likely strike a plea deal with the police in order to get this done quickly, pay a fine, be available for teams, and essentially to make it look not that bad. Because as bad as it is to have misdemeanor driving, reckless driving on your record, that's not great, right? And obviously in this situation, it resulted in the tragic death of 2, as well as 2 more who were injured in the hospital, right? That's not good. The question that teams need to answer is he going to miss any time in the short term? If we draft him, do we get him right away, right? That's one question they have to answer. The second question they have to answer is this going to happen again, right? And I would imagine that guessing, I would imagine that a relatively light guilty plea would make it seem like it is in indiscretion. He does have a history of moving violations. He was pulled over for speeding, I think in September, I want to say, going 98 and a 45 or something like that. And so that's a conversation. But I think that he could very credibly say that this experience changed him, because I think one thing that we have to keep in mind is there are a bunch of things that teams are concerned about. Maybe, teams are really concerned about the fact that he misled police upon return. But one thing that we have to keep in mind is that there's no chance that he isn't traumatized. He's almost certainly traumatized by this event, right? And trauma will characterize your reactions to what's happening. And a fear response could be to try and distance yourself without even intending to mislead the police, right? And I'm not saying that's the reason why. I'm saying it's one thing that we have to keep in mind, right? And he needs to, and hopefully he'll find a team that will understand that and help him kind of move forward. But that's just like another thing that we have to keep it. There's a lot of reasons to potentially judge him, and maybe you're correct to judge him. You're probably correct to judge him. But another thing that we have to keep in mind is that this has probably deeply impacted him, and maybe that's a reason that this kind of behavior won't reoccur. And that's going to be part of a weird conversation that teams are going to have about, is this somebody that we want on our team? And maybe.
Yeah. No, we've seen some draft weekend falls. Larmy Tunsil, Gaskmax, La'el Collins was a big one. So it's just going to be interesting. Obviously, now you got a 2-month window, like you both mentioned, to kind of soften this blow. We'll see how much things change from now until then with Carter. So what's your schedule look like now the rest of the day? Who's at the podiums you want to talk to today? Who's maybe going to be sitting down? You mentioned you guys, the media that is going to be able to watch these guys perform on the field. What's the itinerary look like? What's a day in the life of superstar reporter and insider Arif Hasan at Lucas Oil Stadium?
You're going to have to ask a superstar reporter for that first, but I'll do my best.
Stop it.
Look at me. Hey. No, the mornings are always podiums. I shouldn't say always. They've changed the schedule pretty substantially over the past 2-3 years. But, this week, the mornings are always podiums. Tomorrow morning, it's going to be a quarterbacks, which is going to be great. We're going to see some wide receivers and tight ends as well. And the quarterbacks, that podium session is going to be just like dense and packed and kind of difficult to get your question in. But, today was defensive backs. There's usually some characters among the defensive backs that are kind of fun to interact with. Yesterday was the defensive lineman. And kickers yesterday too. Missed that. Unfortunately, tragically, I missed the kickers. But so you do the podiums at the beginning. And you also had general managers, coaches at the beginning of the week, and those podiums ran all the way past the afternoon. The player interviews do not. The player interviews basically stop around noon. And then you've got basically the rest of the day to do what you need to do. So for me, a lot of that is writing, but I will be headed over at 3. The Lucas Oil Stadium opens up to reporters to be able to go and watch the workouts. I'm going to head over there. I'm going to write about the experience of watching it. I don't know if I'm going to have any takeaways from the players. Sure. Maybe. Mm-hmm. But primarily my takeaway is, isn't this interesting? And I'll write about that. And then after that, I'm going to go to Fogo de Chao. One of the great things about this week is that every night is a lot. Every night is so much. There's so much happening. Mm-hmm. I've been to a steakhouse every single night. My bank account's running thin. I have maxed out my per diem every single night here. And then after dinner, which I need to remind you, it doesn't have to be a steakhouse. I'm just like, as a suggest, we could go anywhere. Just if anybody's watching, we could go anywhere.
Right.
It doesn't have to be a steakhouse. But after the steakhouse, dinner, we hit the bars. We talk to whoever we talk to. Sometimes team personnel, sometimes team PR. Kind of fun to catch up with them. Sometimes you don't remember necessarily who you talk to for one reason or the other. Because they
all start to blend together a little bit after a while, don't they?
Yeah,
just a little bit.
That's the reason. Yeah,
that's the reason.
But yeah, people have been out until like 3-4 in the morning. Come back, nap. I say they don't even sleep; they nap, and then they go to availability at 8. I'm younger than a lot of people here, but I definitely don't feel it.
It's a grind, man. It sounds like a gauntlet, but it sounds so fun. I got serious FOMO going on right now. Have you pulled Peter King or like Mike Florio aside yet and said, "Hey, man, just be real. What's the is this all a bit? Do you really talk like this in real life, or what's going on?"
No.
What's going on? Oh, you do. Oh, this is you? Okay, yeah. Oh, wow. Okay. All right.
I haven't talked to Peter King or Mike Florio. I did speak. They're both the NBC crew now, right? Because Peter King's over at I did speak super briefly. He probably doesn't even remember. I did speak super briefly to Chris Sims. He seems like a good guy. He is a former quarterback, so he is very tall. But I don't know. He seemed pretty real. That was kind of nice. That's not going to stop me from making fun of his takes on Twitter.
Nor should it. Yeah.
But when has ever meeting anybody in real life stopped me from making fun of them? So, yeah, I don't know. I've been able to talk to a bunch of people that have been around for a really long time. It's been really cool.
Love it, man. Great breakdown, great itinerary. Have a lot of fun down there. Be safe, all right? Just maybe an early night tonight. One night you got to have an early night. All right, it's like Vegas. Supper. You can't go 5 nights straight in Vegas.
Mark Schofield is not going to let me go in early.
No, he will not. No, if I know Mark like I think I do, he will not. No. NFL Combine Draft coming up next, but first I got to tell you about Built Bar. Made with 100% real chocolate. Find them everywhere you look now, Walmart, Sam's Club, or online at Built.com with promo code LOCKDOWN15 for 15% off. They're good, and they're good for you. 17 grams of protein with just 4 grams of sugar. Built Bars pack the perfect punch of nutrition and taste. An easy and delicious treat without the fat or calories. Stock up and grab them on the go at BuiltBar.com with promo code LOCKEDON15. All right, guys, time has come. Let's rip through one quick draft here. Here's the deal. I wanted to give you guys a couple options today. So for our draft, I got 3 options, all NFL draft related, given it's combine week. Pull up your list. As you're doing that, you'll see 3 options. Now, I don't know. Maybe you can take a guess. But here's your 3 options. You guys can figure this out amongst yourselves. Which draft you want to partake in? First of all is biggest Vikings busts. So we got Kellen Mond, Chaz Surratt, Wyatt Davis, etc., etc. Second one is biggest NFL draft busts. Josh Rosen, John Ross, Blake Bortles, Trent Richardson, Jamarcus Russell. Third draft, this is your third option. This is the one I originally planned for, but I was like, I don't know if they're going to like this. It's the worst combine performances by players who ended up being successful in the NFL. Anquan Boldin was already mentioned on the show earlier. Joe Hayden, Drew Brees, guys like that. So of those 3 options, I'll save the other 2, put them in the bank. We'll do those in a couple other weeks at some point. Which draft do you guys want to partake in today?
I like the last one. Not only is it a little bit more positive, it's the combine right now, so it's a little bit more kind of contextually appropriate.
I like it. Okay, so here we go. I can't go first. We'll rotate snake draft per usual. Not a super large list. Think we got about 20, 21 names. I guess maybe we could do 5 picks. I got 4 picks etched in here as of now. What did we do last time? Paper, rock, scissors? That worked out really well. That worked out great.
It worked out really
That worked out great.
I know. Pick a number between 1 and 100, and then Luke and I will guess, and then whoever's closest.
Okay, I got it. All right, on the
50.
count of 3, you both say your number. Ready? 1, 2, 3.
50.
69.
Luke, you almost got it dead on. I almost did it. It's just I
picked
can't
that
live up to
because
the
I
brand.
thought it was something you would do.
It was 18. I went with 18. So, Arif, you got the first pick. Again, we'll do snake-style draft. Again, these are the guys who stunk it up at the combine, right? You're down there in Indy. There's going to be some big names who stink it up this week, but go on to have successful careers in the NFL. If you're listening, Antonio Brown struggled. He didn't get drafted to the 6th round. Orlando Brown Jr., maybe the worst offensive lineman combine ever. Terrell Suggs, Navarro Bowman. There's a lot of them on here. Got about 20, 21 names on here. Arif, is one guy sticking out to you the most?
Yeah, Tom Brady. That's my pick.
Unbelievable. Did you see I tried to bury him on the list a little bit?
Yeah, I saw that.
Tom
that was
Brady.
clever, too.
Is the goal here to make the best team or to make the best team and also the worst combines?
A great question. I don't really think I have an answer on that.
It really depends on how you tweet out the poll, right?
Yeah. It's a great question. Because you're right. Some of these guys' combine was far worse than others. It was they hadn't had combine compared to how they were supposed to do. Wasn't necessarily a horrible combine per se. But what do you guys think? I'll take any opinions you may have.
I would say not the best team, the best list of players who vastly outperformed their combine performance in the NFL.
The best argument against the combine.
Perfect. Okay.
Yeah.
I like that. Best argument against the combine. I like it. All right, Luke. Pick number 2. Who you got?
I mean, the guy that it gets brought up every time a wide receiver tanks his combine is Anquan Boldin.
Dang it. I was really hoping I could snag him.
The iconic one.
Anquan Boldin. Good pick. All right, back to back. I guess I'll go. I'm a little hazy. Was Drew Brees' combine that bad? I pulled up like 4 or 5 lists, and Drew Brees was on every one of them. I'm going to go Terrell Suggs for sure, because he's also another guy that usually gets brought up with bad combines. And then I'm going to go with. You can go with Drew Brees. Whatever. I always lose these things anyways to a Reef, so it really doesn't matter. All right, back to you, Luke.
I am going to go with that. There's 2 I'm really struggling to decide between, but I think I'm also going to go with somebody who is like famously slow but good anyways, and that's Keenan Allen.
Yeah, I threw him on. You can see him. He's dead last on the list. I threw him on at the last second because Arif actually mentioned his name early in the pod, and he reminded me that Keenan should be on this list because of that.
A lot of people are talking about him
with
Jackson Smith and Jiba.
Oh, yeah. Okay, I like that.
That fits, yeah.
All right, Arif, still some big names out here. Zach Miller, Justin Houston, Elvis Dumerville, 5'11", Joe Hayden, bad combine.
I might date myself with this one, and this might be more a personal experience because I got destroyed in fantasy his rookie year. because I was surprised someone even drafted him. Arian Foster.
Dude, that's a good one.
Yeah, because he went undrafted, right? So like the fact that one of the fantasy guys that I was competing against drafted him onto his team, undrafted running back. He was only on his team like Steve Slayton, right?
Yeah, undrafted, and then turns into the number 1 running back in the league for a year or two there.
Yeah, that was wild.
4.68 40 is why he dropped out of the draft itself. Ended up being a UDFA. Ball security concerns coming out of Tennessee. Forgot he's even from Tennessee. Yes, 4 Pro Bowls though, thriving in that zone blocking scheme too. Yeah. So that was huge.
Perfect.
And then I'm going to bring up another classic. Just I don't even think he's as good as people say, but it's kind of a classic. Oh my gosh, the combine doesn't matter. Jarvis Landry.
Yeah, Landry,
that was the other guy I was thinking of.
Yeah, 4.65 40. Vert was unsightly, 28.5-inch vert.
Yeah, unsightly is actually the right word for that. Oh.
Holy smokes. Man, that's bad. All right, that is terrible. All right, Luke, coming back to you. That's a stacked team so far. I feel like you got big names on there, and then also obviously fits the criteria of what we're drafting as well. Tom Brady, Foster, and Landry. Dang.
So I'm trying to think of like who gets talked about the most.
Yeah.
Maybe I'm a little overexposed to it because he was a bit of a Vikings Twitter crush when he was up for trade from the Ravens. But I'm going to take Orlando Brown. He's not taken yet, right?
No,
he's not. I was considering him, and I took Jarvis over him. So, yeah, that's fair.
Yeah, I'm going to take Orlando Brown. Just like all these examples of like I'm trying to stay a little bit more. Well, I guess not.
It's tough for me because I have this combine spreadsheet and I've got like scores for every player, and so I'm like really in it, and I'm just like, he sucked. Did people know that his combine?
Yeah, it's like who did people talk about though?
Yeah,
and people talked about the Orlando Brown one a ton.
Yeah,
anytime a tackle is going to bomb the combine, he's going to be like the.
Going forward. Yeah, for sure.
I think legitimately, no exaggeration, the worst combine performance in recorded history for an offensive lineman. I mean, it was just that bad. It was
like to the point where there were questions about if he trained.
Because he ran like an 8-second 3-cone or something like that, right? Like I'm trying to remember all of his workouts.
Yeah, I don't have his numbers in front of me, but it was bad. All right, I'm going to go with Joe Hayden. He seems to be on a lot of these lists. Ran a 4.52, not horrible, but 5'11" corner. Let's see, third worst shuttle time that year.
That's big. Orlando Brown, I confused the short shuttle and the 3-cone. He ran a 5.38 short shuttle.
Not bad.
I've never heard of that in my life.
Not bad. No, that's terrible. All right, and then just for the clicks, Antonio Brown.
Also, with the 6th round. Jump.
Let's see.
6'10" broad jump.
Yeah, that's
awful combine performance from Orlando Brown.
Yeah, that's horrible. Cam Chancellor's on a lot of these lists too. I didn't put him on there. You can fling out anybody else you want to, by the way. This is a horrible team. This may be my worst draft I've ever put together. All right, back to you. Left some big names out here for you.
Yeah, I think I'm just going for a big, well-known name. So I'll take Navarro Bowman.
That leaves me. So we're definitely not having a 5th round, right?
You guys have actual time constraints. I'm good.
Yeah, I've got time.
All right, let's do it. I'll throw in pick number 5. All right, there you go. Back to back.
So, okay, that changes my conversation topics because I was going to talk about all the players I would pick, right? And now I get to maybe potentially keep in my back pocket. So a lot of these guys are well known for having bad combines. Some of them turned out to be okay players. Some of them turned out to be great players. I kind of want to avoid some of that. I just want a guy who had a bad combine who turned into a potential all-pro. I'm taking Justin Houston.
Good
and his explosion, if I remember correctly, his explosion numbers were actually good, but it was his 40 and his agility that were awful. I think his agility was terrible.
Oh, failed a drug test too that week. So back to back.
Round? Yeah. We take just a quick look at Justin Houston. 6'9", 5'3" cone, but 36. This is the other way around. His explosion was whatever. Whatever. He's on my list. Man, this is tough because one of these guys that I kind of want to look at was an okay player. He just had one of the worst combines at his position ever. Another one I'm not even confident had a bad combine. He's a really good player, so I don't know if I want to pick him. It was a decent pro day. It was a bad combine. I'm taking Calais Campbell.
That's a stacked team. Brady, Foster, Landry, Houston, Campbell. Okay, Luke, last pick, Mr. Irrelevant. Anquan Bolden, Keenan Allen, Orlando Brown Jr., Navarro Bowman.
So I just looked it up. What if I told you a linebacker ran a 5:09:40. Vontaze perfect.
You're taking, that's the guy. That's who I was just referencing.
He didn't turn into like all that great of a player, but he had a career. He carved out a career.
He was.
That's what I was referencing.
That combine suggested that he
bad combine.
Yeah,
right. It suggested that he should work in a warehouse. That's what it suggested.
Yeah, it suggested that he should not make a team ever.
Yeah.
And he carved out a reasonable career.
One of the worst combines at his position ever. It turned into an all right player. That's what I was referencing.
Yeah, I figured. That's why I was like hoping you wouldn't take him because I wanted.
Yeah, but Calais Campbell. He's probably not making the Hall of Fame, but the fact that I thought about it, that's a pretty good argument.
Yeah, no, that's a good pick. But like Burfict's career didn't end too much on like the merit of his, like a lot of it was the fact that he couldn't stop incurring 15-yard penalties.
Yeah, right.
And hurting people.
That too.
Yeah. Well, yeah. We went a different direction there. But it was like had nothing to do with his athleticism. But
strangely,
totally bombed the combine.
Yeah.
All right, to wrap up, Alfred Morris, maybe he was pretty bad. 4.6 40. People thought he was maybe a fullback coming out pretty slow.
Remember that?
Josh Norman's was bad, right? I'm not just making that up. His 40 was just atrocious.
Yeah,
I'm gonna go with Norman. Bad. Elvis Dumerville is like his only thing was like he was 5'11" and you're a defensive end. Doesn't make sense. I don't think his testing numbers were like
4.66.
4.66 as a corner. Yeah.
Wow. Okay.
And not great agility numbers. 33-inch vert, I think. So yeah. Well, now that the draft is done, if all of my picks had been sniped, I was just going to go off the script and pick Za'Darius Smith. Pretty bad combine.
Wow,
that would have been a good pander move.
I was thinking, but I was like, Calais Campbell? Nah, come on. I got to take Calais Campbell.
Was there any other guys that when you first glanced at the list, you're like, there's another guy that maybe I didn't put out there that you're like, this guy should be on that list as well? I threw Keenan Allen on at the last second. Like I said, Cam Chancellor was on some of those lists. Any other guys that popped in mind? Like Za'Darius Smith, that's a good example.
Za'Darius, Richard Sherman. Yeah, he ran a somewhat slow 40, did not have a 3-cone, but he was tall, smart, had long arms. So that's probably one. And maybe I should have just picked him anyway. But, those two come to mind, Za'Darius Smith and Richard Sherman.
All right, there you have it, boys. I thought that was just a fun way, showcase and display just how many draft picks that have struggled, had terrible combines, but still went on to have pretty successful NFL careers as we gear up for draft season now. Go check the Twitter feed later on. Get your vote in. Tell us who you think had the best draft. All right, guys, that's a wrap today. Remember, like, rate, review, and subscribe to the YouTube channel. Join us 4 days a week, Monday through Thursday, with your 1-hour breakdown of everything Minnesota Vikings. Don't forget, we're a podcast too, free and available, all platforms. Subscribe, drop us that 5-star review, and find us now streaming on your Roku or Amazon Fire Stick devices. Just look out for our Locked On Sports Minnesota app there as well. That's the man, Arif Hasan, live in Indy. Pro Football Network on Twitter, at Arif Hasan NFL. Luke Braun, check him out every day on Locked On Vikings. He's on Twitter, at Luke Braun NFL. We're back Monday with another episode of The Football Party, part of the Locked On Sports Minnesota Network. For Arif, the two Lukes, until next time, signing out. Unbelievable.